My wife left me after 20 years, convinced me to sign over our $350, $0 house and a $200, $0 inheritance, only to discover she's been secretly laundering money through our property with her fake business. Now she's suing me to claim everything, and I have no idea how to fight back. I never really believed in the phrase things happen for a reason, but looking back, I think I can see now that some things happen to shatter your world completely. I had a pretty good life, or so I thought. Married to Lisa for 20 years, we had a house worth about $350, and I'd recently inherited a decent chunk of change, around $200, $0, that I was planning to use for a new business. We seemed solid, or so I believed, until one day everything changed in a way I never saw coming. It started with little things. Lisa would be more irritable than usual, snapping at me over nothing, canceling plans at the last minute, or staying out late without any explanation. I brushed it off at first, convinced she was just stressed or tired. But then the texts started. I caught her on her phone more often, hiding her screen when I walked into the room. She'd dismiss it, say she was talking to a friend or some client for her fake business, which she'd always insisted was just a side gig, but something felt off. The real shocker hit when I decided to surprise her at work one day. I knew she worked late often, so I thought I'd bring her dinner. When I got there, I saw her in a back office with a guy I'd never seen before, whispering pretty intimately. They were close, touching hands, leaning in. I froze outside the door, watching her laugh at something he said, her hand resting on his knee. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to believe it, but the signs were there. I saw her for what she was, cheating, lying, and hiding a secret life behind my back. That moment was like a punch to the gut. I didn't storm in or scream. I just backed away and left. But I knew I had to confront her. I couldn't let this go without answers. When I got home, I waited until she was in the shower, then went through her phone. It was a mess: texts, pictures, calls. I found messages that made my blood boil. They were explicit, full of promises, and she was clearly cheating on me with this guy, Jake. I couldn't believe she'd been lying for so long, pretending everything was fine while she was out screwing someone else. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat there, feeling betrayed, furious, and utterly helpless. I kept asking myself, how did I miss all this? How did the woman I loved turn into someone so cold and dishonest? The worst part was realizing that her lies had been a shield, hiding her affairs, her money laundering through her business, and now she was trying to spin it all to make herself look innocent. I felt like I'd been living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I called her at work, told her I knew everything. She tried to deny it, of course, said I was paranoid, jealous, imagining things. But I had all the evidence. I laid it out for her: the texts, the pictures, the times she was out late. Her response was classic Lisa. She called me crazy, said I was overreacting, that I was just insecure, but I knew better. I saw her true face now, and it was uglier than I ever thought possible. The betrayal hit me hard. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. We built a life together, or so I thought. Now I was staring at the wreckage of what I thought was a marriage built on trust and respect. My mind raced, trying to process everything: her infidelity, her lies about her business, the money laundering she'd been doing with our house and inheritance. She convinced me to sign over our house, which I thought was a generous gesture, but it turns out she was just using it as a cover for her illegal activities. I felt sick knowing I'd been so blind, so naive. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let her get away with it all, but I also didn't want to act impulsively. I needed a plan. I started digging into her financials, her business, everything I could find. It was a wild ride, discovering she'd been laundering money through our property, funneling cash from her fake business into accounts she'd hidden from me, and all the while playing the perfect wife in front of everyone else. I realized she'd been planning this for years, and I was the fool who trusted her. In that moment, I understood there was no saving this marriage. She'd betrayed me in every possible way, and now I had to decide what to do next. I was furious, heartbroken, and feeling more alone than I ever had. I knew I couldn't let her keep screwing me over. I'd have to fight back, not just to clear my name, but to get some kind of justice for the years I lost trusting her. And so, here I am, trying to figure out how to fight a woman who's been lying to my face for so long. I don't know what's worse, the fact that she cheated or that she used me to cover her illegal schemes. Either way, I've got a long road ahead, and I'm not going down without a fight. After discovering her affair and the extent of her lies, I knew I had to act fast. Lisa wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively laundering money through our house and her fake business. The more I dug, the more I realized I was sitting on a ticking time bomb. She had been so convincing, lying about her business, claiming it was just some side hustle, when in reality she'd been funneling cash, using our property as a cover. I felt like a complete idiot for trusting her all these years, but now I had to get my head straight and figure out how to fight back. The first thing I did was get a hold of a good lawyer. I knew I couldn't just confront her and hope for the best. I needed legal help, especially since she was already threatening to sue me over the house and inheritance she convinced me to sign over. I still remember that day. I sat in the lawyer's office, feeling like I'd stepped into a nightmare. I handed over all the evidence I had: texts, emails, bank statements. The lawyer looked over everything carefully, then told me I had a case, but I'd need to be prepared for a fight. Lisa wasn't just a cheater, she was a manipulator and a scammer. While I was gathering my evidence, I started to piece together her entire scheme. It was wild. She'd set up this fake business, supposedly a consulting firm, but it was just a front. She'd been funneling illegal money, using our house as a sort of staging ground. I found bank accounts under fake names, transfers that didn't make sense, and even some suspicious receipts from places I'd never heard of. It all pointed to her laundering money, and I could see now why she was so determined to keep her secrets hidden. She'd been playing a long game, and I was only just starting to see the full picture. Of course, Lisa's reaction to all this was classic. She everything called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her. She spun lies like she always did, saying she was just trying to make a living, that I was overreacting, that I was jealous and insecure. She even had the nerve to call me controlling and paranoid, as if her cheating and illegal activities were just innocent mistakes. I couldn't believe the audacity. The woman I'd loved for 2 decades was now a stranger, and her lies kept piling up. I decided I couldn't just sit back and let her manipulate her way out of this. I started recording conversations just in case. I knew she was capable of twisting anything I said. I also contacted an accountant who specialized in money laundering cases. I needed to understand exactly how deep she'd gone, how much money she'd moved, and what legal steps I could take to recover what was mine. I wasn't just fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for my financial future. That house, that inheritance, they were part of my life, and I wasn't going to let her steal them from me. One night I confronted her again, this time with my lawyer's presence on a call. I told her I knew everything, that I had evidence, and that she was in serious trouble. Her response was nothing short of a meltdown. She screamed, called me a stalker, a jealous husband, claimed I was making this all up, but I had proof. I played her the recordings, showed her the bank statements. Her face turned red with rage, and I saw her real self, bitchy, manipulative, and desperate. She threatened me, said she had power and friends in high places, but I knew I had the law on my side. That moment was a turning point. I realized I could just rely on her to come clean or change her ways. She'd lied so much that I didn't trust her anymore. I had to prepare for a legal battle, possibly a messy divorce, and a fight over the money laundering charges. I started to understand that her entire life was built on lies, and I was just starting to peel back the layers of her deception. I felt a mix of anger and hopelessness, but also a strange sense of clarity. I was finally seeing her for who she really was, and I knew I had to take control of my future. I also started to think about what I wanted in the long run. This wasn't just about catching her cheating or stopping her illegal schemes. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my sanity. I realized I'd been living in her shadow, trusting her blindly, and that had to change. I needed to stand up for myself, even if it meant losing the house or the inheritance. I wasn't going to let her ruin me, not anymore. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I was going to do it without her lies, clouding everything. So I kept pushing forward, gathering more evidence, talking to professionals, and planning my next moves. I knew the road ahead was going to be rough. She was clever and she had resources I didn't even know about. But I also knew I had the truth on my side. And that was the only thing that mattered now. I was done being a victim. It was time to take back control, no matter what it took. Once I had a clear picture of what Lisa had been up to, I realized I needed to act fast before she covered her tracks even more. The first step was to freeze any accounts she might have used for laundering money. I contacted my bank and explained the situation, showed them the suspicious transactions, the fake business documents, everything I'd uncovered. Luckily, they were cooperative, and I was able to put a hold on some of her accounts. That bought me a little time, but I knew I couldn't rely on just that. Lisa was smart. She'd probably have backups or hidden accounts somewhere else. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her business. I hired a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. It was a strange feeling, like I was turning into a detective in my own life. But I had no choice. The PI found evidence of her funneling money into offshore accounts, using shell companies, and even paying off some shady contacts. She'd been laundering money for years, and I was only now connecting the dots. Every new discovery made my blood boil, but it also made me more determined to stop her. I realized she'd been living a double life, and I was just the fool who got played. Lisa, of course, started to get wind of my investigations. She became more bitchy, more aggressive, trying to gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. One night she stormed into the house, screaming about how I was ruining everything, how I was jealous of her success, and how I was crazy for suspecting her. She looked genuinely furious, like she thought she could intimidate me back into silence. But I didn't back down. I told her I knew about her affair, her money laundering, and her lies. Her face twisted into a sneer, and she accused me of ruining our family, but I knew the truth. I'd uncovered her entire web of lies, and I wasn't going to let her spin her way out of it. I also started to document everything: texts, emails, her reactions to my questions. I wanted a solid paper trail just in case this turned into a legal battle. I knew she'd try to deny everything, so I had to be prepared. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I refused to let her manipulate me anymore. Every time she lied or called me paranoid, I just kept gathering more evidence. I realized that her bitchy, manipulative attitude was a defense mechanism. She was cornered, and she knew it. The more I learned, the angrier I got. She had convinced me to sign over the house, telling me it was a generous gesture, but it was just another part of her plan to hide her assets. I'd been naive to think she wanted a simple life with me. Instead, she'd been planning her escape, laundering money, and cheating behind my back for years. And all the while, I was the idiot trusting her. I felt like a fool, but also like I'd finally woken up just in time. One thing I couldn't ignore was how she was trying to turn the tables. She started to spread rumors saying I was abusive or unstable, trying to get people on her side. I knew her game. She'd always been good at twisting facts in her favor. But I had witnesses, I had evidence, and I had the truth. I started prepping for the worst: a legal battle, maybe even a custody fight if she decided to turn her lies into a full-blown war. I knew she'd do anything to keep her secrets hidden and her freedom intact. At this point, I was exhausted, but I also felt more alive than I had in years. I'd been so blinded by love and trust that I didn't see the signs of her deception. Now that I was finally seeing her for what she was, an unfaithful, manipulative liar, I refused to let her ruin me. I was ready to fight, even if it meant losing everything. Honestly, I didn't care about the house or the inheritance anymore. What mattered was my sanity, my integrity, and making sure she couldn't get away with her schemes. I reached out to my lawyer again, told him I wanted to file for divorce and also pursue charges related to her money laundering. It was a long shot, but I knew the evidence was strong enough. I had her texts, her bank accounts, the PI's reports. I was starting to see how deep her lies went, and I was determined to expose her. I'd never felt so betrayed and furious at the same time. It was like waking up from a nightmare, only to realize you'd been living one for years. The worst part was knowing she'd been so bitchy, so manipulative, and so convinced she could walk all over me. Well, now she was the one who was going to be walked all over, by the law, by the truth, and by her own lies catching up with her. By the time I had all my ducks in a row, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. Lisa's attitude had shifted from defensive to outright hostile. She was furious, calling me every name in the book, accusing me of ruining her life, and trying to gaslight me into thinking I was the one at fault. But I'd had enough. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I sat her down one evening calmly but firmly and told her I knew everything. The affair, the laundering, the lies. I laid out the evidence on the table showing her I had her dead to rights. Her reaction was a mixture of anger and panic. She tried to deny everything, but I cut her off. I told her I was done playing her games. If she thought she could keep lying and cheating her way out, she was mistaken. I told her I was filing for divorce and pursuing charges against her for the money laundering. That shut her up for a moment. Her bitchy smirk faded, replaced by a look of pure panic. She started to scream, calling me a stalker, a control freak, and a jealous husband. But I was past caring about her tantrums. I knew I had the evidence and I was ready to fight. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I met with my lawyer, finalized my divorce papers, and prepared to take her to court. I also filed a police report for the illegal money laundering. It was a complicated process. She'd hidden her assets well, but I had enough proof to make a strong case. I still couldn't believe how much she'd lied, how she'd used me and our house as a pawn in her illegal schemes. It was like waking up from a nightmare, only to realize it was real and I was trapped in the middle of it. Meanwhile, Lisa was doing everything she could to turn the situation around. She accused me of being the bad guy, spreading rumors about how I was abusive or mentally unstable. She even tried to get her friends involved, painting me as the villain in her twisted story. But I had witnesses, recordings, and bank statements that proved otherwise. I knew that her bitchy attitude was just her way of deflecting. She was panicked because she knew I had her cornered and she didn't like it. One night, she showed up at the house drunk, screaming at me to drop the charges and accusing me of ruining her life. I didn't bother arguing. I just looked at her and told her I was done. Done trusting her, done pretending everything was okay. I told her that she'd used me and betrayed everything we had, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I told her that her lies and scheming had finally caught up with her. She looked at me with pure hatred, but I felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control. The hardest part was knowing she'd never truly admit what she'd done. She'd keep lying, keep manipulating, but I had enough evidence to bring her down. I knew she'd fight to the bitter end, but I was prepared. I moved forward with the divorce, and I also started working with authorities on the laundering charges. It was a long shot, but I was determined to see her pay for what she'd done. I also started to focus on rebuilding myself, getting therapy, talking to friends, and trying to get some sense of normalcy back. Through all this, I began to realize just how much I'd been blinded by love. I'd trusted her blindly for 20 years, and she'd used that trust to her advantage. But now I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, cheating, money-laundering bitch who thought she could walk all over me. The betrayal cut deep, but it also woke me up. I knew I'd never let someone do this to me again. I'd learned a harsh lesson about trust, greed, and the importance of paying attention to the signs. And even if I lost the house and the inheritance, I knew I'd come out of this stronger. I was done being the fool, and I was ready to fight for my future on my own terms. The legal process dragged on, and every day felt like a new assault on my sanity. Lisa was relentless, trying to smear my name, claiming I was trying to ruin her reputation, that I was just jealous of her success, or that I was some controlling husband who couldn't handle her independence. Honestly, I didn't care about her lies anymore. I had enough evidence to prove her guilt, her affair, her laundering, her manipulation. But that didn't make the fight any easier. It just made me angrier. Meanwhile, I had to deal with the emotional fallout. I was devastated, furious, and feeling betrayed on a level I never thought possible. I'd spent 2 decades building a life, a home, a future, and it was all crumbling because of her greed and dishonesty. I'd always been the stable one, the dependable guy, and now I was fighting to save what little was left of my integrity. There were nights I'd lie awake, thinking about how she'd lied to me, how she'd cheated, how she'd manipulated me into signing over our house. The betrayal was like a deep wound that refused to heal. One day, I got a call from my lawyer. The court had scheduled a hearing, and Lisa was trying to claim that I was mentally unstable, that I'd been abusive, anything to distract from her crimes. I knew she'd do everything to keep her secrets buried. That woman was a master manipulator, and I'd seen her lie her way out of every situation. But I also knew I had the truth on my side. I had the recordings, the bank statements, the witnesses. I was ready for whatever she threw at me. The court hearing was a nightmare. Lisa showed up looking bitchy and smug, trying to act innocent, like she was the victim here. She spun tales about how I was controlling, jealous, and mentally unstable. She painted herself as the innocent wife, betrayed by her own husband. I sat there seething, knowing that her words were lies, but also knowing I had to stay composed. I presented my evidence, her texts, her bank accounts, her fake business documents. The judge listened carefully, and I could see the wheels turning. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that I was trying to ruin her reputation and that I had no proof of her illegal activities. I handed over the evidence I'd collected, and the judge finally looked at her and said, "Based on what I've seen, there is substantial reason to believe that the defendant has engaged in illegal financial activities." That was the moment I'd been waiting for. It felt like a small victory, but I knew the fight was far from over. In the aftermath of the hearing, Lisa's bitchy attitude turned into outright desperation. She started to lash out, accusing me of ruining her life, saying I was just jealous of her success. She threatened to sue me personally, to ruin me financially, but I wasn't worried about her empty threats anymore. I'd already started working with authorities on the laundering case, and I knew she was cornered. Her lies couldn't hold up forever. I also started to rebuild my life outside of all this chaos. I moved out of the house, found a small apartment nearby, and began therapy to deal with the emotional fallout. I felt exhausted, betrayed, and angry, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control. I stopped trusting her completely, and I was more cautious with my money, my future, and my trust in others. I learned that even the most seemingly perfect relationships can hide dark secrets, and that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail to get your life back. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown from this experience. I learned not to ignore the small signs of betrayal, those little irritations, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences. I learned that money can be a weapon and a trap, and that some people will do anything to protect their lives. Most importantly, I learned that I am stronger than I thought, and that standing up for myself was the only way to truly reclaim my life. Lisa may have been the manipulative bitch who tried to destroy everything I built, but I refused to let her win. I am determined to come out of this better, smarter, and more cautious. Because at the end of the day, betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. And I'm not going to let her change me into someone I'm not. The final stretch has been the most intense. After the court's ruling, Lisa's true colors came out even more. She was furious, screaming, crying, trying to manipulate everyone around her. But I had made my peace with the fact that she was never going to accept the truth. Her bitchy attitude hadn't changed. She was still convinced she was the victim, still trying to spin her lies. But I didn't care anymore. I had already taken all the steps needed to protect myself, legal, financial, emotional, and I was finally starting to feel like I was reclaiming my life. The aftermath was a mix of relief and bitterness. The house was sold off to settle debts, and I managed to get back a good portion of what she tried to drain from me. The money laundering charges were still pending, but I had faith that the authorities would see through her lies and bring her to justice. In the meantime, I focused on rebuilding what I could, myself, my confidence, and my future. I moved into a smaller place, closer to work, and started a new job that I genuinely enjoy. I didn't want her to win, not just financially, but emotionally. I wanted to prove that I was stronger than her manipulations. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from all this. Trust isn't something to take lightly. People can hide their true selves behind a facade for years. Lisa was good at that, charming, bitchy, manipulative, and cunning. She used her fake business as a cover for her illegal activities, and she used our marriage as a shield to hide her lies. But the biggest lesson I learned is that sometimes you have to fight for yourself, no matter how hurt, betrayed, or exhausted you feel. I also learned to listen to my instincts. When something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't brush it aside because you want to believe the best. Because in the end, the truth will come out, and it's better to face it head-on than let it destroy you from the inside. Lisa's betrayal hurt more than I can describe, but it also made me realize my own strength. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago, and I don't want to be. I want to be wiser, more cautious, and more aware of the red flags. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything, I feel a strange sense of closure. I've lost a lot, money, trust, years, but I've gained something far more valuable, clarity. I see her for what she was, and I see myself for who I am, someone who's been through hell but survived. If there's anything I want others to take from this, it's this. Never ignore the signs. Don't let someone manipulate you into thinking you're overreacting. And when you find out the truth, don't be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours. Because at the end of the day, your integrity and your peace of mind are worth more than any house or inheritance. Lisa may have been a bitchy, manipulative liar, but I refuse to let her define me. I've learned that the strongest thing you can do is stand up for yourself, even when everything seems lost. I can't change what she did, but I can control how I respond. And I choose to move forward with my head held high, knowing I faced the storm and came out the other side. That's all anyone can ask for.